Never date a single mother. Ever. Never date a single mother, period. Never date her. No exceptions. Never date a single mother. There are absolutely no exceptions to this rule, and I'm going to tell you why.
There is zero benefit in dating single moms.
Single mothers don't care about their kids, you know.
Single mothers, I think, is the really backbone of it all. Single mothers are the cause of today's dating.
And the way you avoid becoming a baby mama, first of all, you pick wisely. Pick the guys that you're getting with and the entanglements with. Pick more wisely.
Few moments later.
In my past, I've had 3 girls pregnant before. Bruh. 3. 1 white girl, 1 mixed race girl, and 1 black girl.
If you guessed correctly by the compilation I just played, you probably figure out that this video is about the Manosphere disdain for single mothers, but simultaneously promoting or engaging in behaviors that produce single mothers. Not to mention the group also opposes the institution of marriage and it views it as detrimental to men. Additionally, there are also plenty of men in the space who had children out of wedlock, as well as others who admitted to having unprotected sex and unintended pregnancies.
I mean, I've had so much unprotected sex. I think the coronavirus is afraid of me. I've got like the champion's immune system. I went in there like, oh, Mr. Jonathan, you don't have AIDS, but you do have chlamydia. And I was like, thank God. Thank God I have chlamydia and I don't have AIDS.
I'm so glad I didn't make no child when I was younger. I had some scares now. And I thank God them hoes did not motherfucking go through with that shit. Whether it was a miscarriage or an abortion. Which I didn't decide any of that shit. They decided shit.
The hypocrisy shouldn't come as a surprise. The Red Pill is infamous for making reductionist arguments about complex issues. When it comes to critiquing the plight of men, it relies on structuralist arguments but revert to individualism when it comes to women. With single motherhood, these men assume that the responsibility falls 100% on the woman because she either chose poorly or drove the men away.
But as far as where are the black fathers? Well, quite frankly, it's a simple question. It's a simple answer. You all scared them away.
I mean, either she had she didn't have her eyes open, and she was such a fool that she went with a complete asshole who, as soon as she got pregnant, he left her. Or she herself is such a piece of work that the guy just couldn't stand her, and he left.
Raising a child by yourself. Now, the answer to that is not abortion. You don't kill your child. Why don't you try having some reverence for your vagina and for your womb? How about that?
In the overwhelming majority of circumstances, the guys who are getting sex from black women are these thug types. Why do you think the single mother rate is so high? Why is it so high then? Why is it so high?
The Black Manosphere in particular views the issue through a culture of poverty lens and promotes a halcyon past while citing the Moynihan Report and marriage statistics of emancipated slaves. But I'll save those 2 topics for another video. But there are some men in the Black Manosphere who are hypocritical when it comes to single mothers, primarily because they'll make excuses for non-black women but demonize black women.
If you with a white woman that got kids, you with a single mother. Now,
but they know how to treat you still. At the end of the day, still.
Now, before I proceed, I should state that I'm not advocating that childless men date women with children. Personally, I don't for various reasons. However, there is a difference between having a preference versus demonization. The Red Pill often reverts to the latter.
Single mother. I'm not going to date such a person. I mean, for me, she might as well be a guy, an ugly guy. I mean, a really ugly hunchback guy that I would never want to be with, ever.
In fact, you can find video after video of Red Pillers discussing the pitfalls of dating single mothers, and those videos receiving over 1 million or hundreds of thousands of views. The main reason why these men disdain single mothers boils down to 3 factors. They either were raised by one, encountered many when on the dating market, or were romantically involved with one and the relationship went south. Bitter and regretful about these circumstances, they get online and engage in what is basically group therapy and rail about single mothers.
And then got into a bad relationship with a single mommy for like 3 years or so. And that's basically what all red pilled me.
She had a kid. Yeah, she was a single mom. And it's funny, I thought I could just like skip past it. I thought it wouldn't be that important. I thought I could just, hey, you know what? I'll give him some money every now and then, feed him. Lo and behold, I was wrong.
But to allude to an earlier point, many of these men begrudge women who have children out of wedlock, but encourage their followers to sleep with as many women as possible. Essentially, they want sex without consequences.
Bare minimum, in 2020, the way things are now, with how promiscuous women have become, you owe it to yourself as a guy. You got to get out there and at least have a 50-notch counter higher.
It's naive to believe all men would engage in casual sex responsibly. And even those such as Donovan Sharp, as well as Ramil Amir, who insists he pumps and dumps responsibly, admitted to having slip-ups. Besides the misinformation these men often spew, the blatantly obvious reasons why women become single mothers are divorces, breakups, death of a parent, adoptions, and abandonment. Additionally, single motherhood in the post-war period is a complicated phenomenon. The rate of out-of-wedlock birth increased for every racial and ethnic group since 1965, with whites currently past a threshold of 25%, which was deemed a crisis in 1965 when African Americans hovered around the same percentile. Now, I won't pretend as if there aren't any social problems linked with single motherhood, but unlike the Manosphere, I'm not going to ignore other contributing factors and nuances and pretend people all of a sudden threw up their hands and decided to be quote-unquote less moral. Social scientists have yet to provide convincing arguments to explain this phenomenon. Conservatives tend to favor a theory promulgated by political scientist Charles Murray, who attribute generous federal welfare benefits to growing out-of-wedlock births. But other scholars doubt this claim because as welfare benefits increased in the 1960s, they declined in the 1970s and 1980s when out-of-wedlock births grew the most. The Black Manosphere, unsurprisingly, favors the conservative argument. Liberals, on the other hand, favor sociologist William Julius Wilson's theory, who attributed the rise to the decline of marriageable black men due to job loss for less educated men. But scholars attribute only 3 to 4 or 20% of the decline in black marriages to decrease in employment prospects. Other scholars believe change in attitudes and sexual behaviors is the explanation, but there's no convincing way to measure this quantitatively. The Brooklands Institute provided a persuasive argument. It pointed to the decline in shotgun marriages since 1969 as a factor. In an era in which society condemned premarital sex, men and women had an implicit understanding that if pregnancy occurred before marriage, the two must marry one another. You cannot underestimate how much stigma unwedded mothers had prior to 1970. They could be kicked out of school, ostracized by their peers, or even forced out of town to have birth in secret. The increased availability of contraceptions and abortion made shotgun weddings obsolete. Women no longer needed the promise of marriage in the event of pregnancy. Additionally, women had now fear of losing their partner if they refused sexual relations, as sex without commitment became commonplace in premarital relationships. The sexual revolution granted women more freedom but gave men less responsibility for their welfare. Women bear the brunt of birth and men now had a choice about marriage and child support. But there isn't much stigma for unwedded mothers anymore. Adoption rate peaked in 1970 but declined afterwards. In 1970, for example, only 28% of unwedded mothers kept their child after 3 years of birth. In the 1980s, that number increased to 66%. Now, everything I just stated will likely fly over the head of red pillers because these men are committed to a narrative and gravitate towards confirmation bias. Research cannot change the mind of an intellectually lazy group of men. Nevertheless, many of these men who dish out harsh criticism of single motherhood are living in glass houses because they will pretend as if they are completely blameless.